Yeah, it's different, real different. Not used to being out there. And then the winds came out of the north, and it was howling. We had to end up turning our drill around so we could throw with it instead of into it.
When you looked at the tape of Ty, what did you see, in this past game?
He played a really good game in terms of getting us in a lot of the right plays. He did a great job getting us in the right plays. He was good in his decision making. He had, we had 5 drops in that game, so he was on target also. And he made some big throws. The throw to John was an NFL type throw, and I thought he played overall. He played he played well. He's played better. But he played well. I mean, he rebounded from a subpar performance for him, and it's just again continuing to show he's maturing and working.
Did you notice a different type of burst in Jonathan Gray this past game? I mean, he was making some moves out there that we really hadn't seen him.
Yeah, he on his touchdown run, he made a great move. And I maybe it's is it confidence, now, or is it strength, or just a combination of both. I mean, the touchdown run. The move he made on the safety to create the run, the finish of the run was, something you don't see a lot. It's just an outstanding athlete and instincts, and so you're right. He's probably learning to trust and confident in his rehab now.
Do you still feel like Ty is building, or is he kind of leveling out?
No, he's building. It's all with the quarterbacks. It's always a process. Some days it feels like you're starting all over. Other days it feels like you're gaining on it. I've done this for over right about 20 years, and it's part of what you go through with a first-year player and a guy who's learning the position. So I feel like he's progressing, and we've got a lot of work to do. So that's the humbling factor in that position, and coaching that position. You're never done.
How do you make sure you don't overwhelm him with the things that he has to learn? Do you have to kind of
just a little bit at a time? Yep, a little bit at a time. The things that when I say a little bit at a time, you're always mindful. I've got a section in my position manual called Rules to Live By, and there are things that have happened over to me and to my players over the last over my career. And I always keep those things in front of them because, ironically, those are the things listen to Teddy. He still he says, I still remember rules to live by. You said, and he's going through them at the next level right now still. So those are part of the game. And so I think the things that I've always tried to do is, and a lot of that has to do with management. Keep them in tune to becoming a better manager, because really good quarterbacks, the great ones, are great game managers. And along with that is obviously the decision-making aspect. And I think one of the things we're trying to work with Ty, what I'm trying to work with him now, his mechanics is. When I say mechanics, I'm talking about footwork. That's one of the big areas that he needs to improve on and become more consistent with, and then more consistent with his decision-making and learning how to utilize all the tools that we have available to him. He's still got a ways to go.
And your number one, what's your number one of the rules to live by? What's your number one?
Oh, there's too many of them. They're all too important. They really are. I mean, they're so important. There's so many of them. Like never take a sack on a naked, never take a stack on a 3-step. The rules to live by sack-wise. There's rules to live by. Like scramble throws. Never throw the ball late deep down the middle, never throw the ball late in the outside lanes, things that are just mindful tips that they've always got to be, in tune with, no forced decisions, and, learning how to manage, like the one thing that drives me crazy is foul balls that are deep outside lane throws that are thrown out of bounds. There's no reason for that. And we actually had one with DeJay, and we had him open, so. Again, it's just part of the process. You got to be stern and hard and demanding as a coach, and you got to keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing until you get it consistent. And we've got to work for consistency.
How thick is this manual?
No, it's pretty thick. Over a few years, it gets thick. I try to keep it streamlined. We do. you know, I do quarterback school, you know, throughout the year, and they always have it. You know, always make it available to them. It's in their book all the time, And I make reference back to it. You know, I'll something will happen in practice, and I'll go, okay, let's go to rules to live by. Go to page number 12, and read point 6, and then I'll show it to them on film. So here's why. You know, because you know, developing a quarterback is just, it takes, you got to be a taskmaster. You got to be relentless, and then you're trying to teach them to do that.
But it seems like, though, his only real egregious mistakes the last handful of games is they throw the interception at Iowa State, and he should have eaten the ball.
That's right.
Saturday night on the fumble.
And there's no doubt.
Yeah.
There's no doubt. You know, I mean, really, honestly, even before that, you know, really throw it away.
Right.
You know, throw it away. You know, that was a decision that was based off of, and that's in rules to live by. Once you lay it, you play it. What Ty did on that particular play, he laid aside, which he was correct on, and then he made a, you know, impulse reaction to go back to the other side. And by that time, it's too late, and we're in trouble. So once you lay it, you play it. That's a rule to live by, because we're a full field read team, and you know, you lay it, you play it, and you live with it. You know, so you know, those are all the things that are just part of his development. You just got to keep, keep pushing, keep pushing, keep pushing.
Did the O-line play its best game against?
They played really well. You know, I think you have to put into, you know, not only the O-line, but the tight ends and the fullback, and then our H, which is our lead, you know, our lead or adjuster that does the same work a fullback does for us. Those kids all played really well. And the guys that really go sometimes, you know, unnoticed, or, you know, we don't give enough credit for, you know, explosive runs, are the receivers. They were very good downfield. You know, we were a little bit better at some points. We would have had even more explosive runs. You know, we just quite didn't finish a block or weren't in position, and it cracked. You know, the guy made the hit for a, you know, might have been a 16-yard game when it could have been all the way, or, you know, 10 more yards or more explosive. But those guys did a great job in the perimeter run game, and the lead guys did a great job. And the line was targeted up and got really nice push.
Shawn, was it fall camp when you figured out what you had in John Harris, or when did you kind of see it?
It would have been, I think, honestly, that it started in spring ball. You know, I even go back farther than that. I think he showed his character and his heart during winter conditioning. And that was the first glimmer of, you know, his commitment, the hope that might be out there. And then, you know, he started making plays in spring on a consistent basis. It's one thing to make plays. It's another thing to be consistent at making plays. And that's what he's done. That's a tell of a guy who's totally committed into what they're doing, and he's balling. He's playing really good football. And that's started in spring ball, carried into spring training camp, and of course been a part of our season.
Coach, is this offense at a point where if you had to get into a shootout against West Virginia, like you guys did with Iowa State, that you guys can do that?
You know, we've got to be ready to do that. We've got to be ready to do that. You know, when you get into those kind of things in the game, the mindset is this: you do whatever it takes to win football. And if it means that you know, have to, you know, throw it to do that, if you know, that would be what I'm assuming you're asking about. You know, getting into a throwing contest, you know, you have to be ready to do it. You have to have a plan to do it, and you got to be ready to do it. That's what it takes to win. You know, I know that we're a pretty humble group around here, and that we know we've got a lot of work yet to do. You know, we need to be cleaner in protections. We need to be you know, more precise in our spacing of our route work, and you know, consistent, in other words. And then the same things we just talked about with Ty. So, you know, what we do around here, we just keep working.
Shawn, it's always been presumed that Malcolm and Jonathan have different running styles. It seems like you're calling the same plays for both.
Right.
Do you have the same expectations of both guys?
We do. No, we do. We do. Their skill set, like we were talking about earlier, is you know, similar. Jonathan is slasher. You know, Malcolm can thump and slash, and you know, they're very detailed in their protection. They're very detailed in their route running. So they both have a lot of similar characteristics. They're a lot like, you know, a different degree, but a lot like what you know, Chris Brown and Bobby Purify were when I was at Colorado. They have some, you know, they're similar, but there's something different. And Malcolm's something different, as he can run with thump. and Jonathan can really slash. You know, the cut we were talking about earlier, that was a slash cut. I mean, he created an explosive by putting his foot in the dirt and, you know, cutting through the guy's weak shoulder, and then he was gone.
Do you even consider which guy is in there when you're calling a play? Or can either
Not really. You know, there's you know, I think Malcolm's a guy that you know that on tough yardage plays he would be your first draft choice just because of the thump I'm speaking of. He does a great job running behind his pads. You know, and John would be a guy that you want to handle you know, handle things that are more perimeter oriented. But yet at the same time, T-Rob, you know, T-Rob is invaluable to us with his NFL experience, because in NFL, many of the guys that he's coached and been around, those guys have all had to, you know, you have to, you know, tie the similar running styles together in your run scheme. And T-Rob has done an excellent job of, you know, taking what was one strong suit and developing, or, and well, let me put it like this, the weaker part of his game and developing it. Which is, you know, he's pretty adamant about, you know, in practice, you know, putting Jonathan in those short yardage situations and then putting Malcolm in the perimeter run situations help develop those instincts.
Shawn, I don't know if you've seen any of West Virginia's defensive tape from last year, but to look at them last year and this year, it's two totally different teams. What's working for them this year?
I think what you see in football, you know, you see an experienced group of guys, and you see guys that, you know, have been around, they understand the scheme, they've been coached. You know, they become, you know, seasoned. They become, you know, there's some veteran, you know, players that at least, and also can show the younger players how to do it and what's expected. I did not see last year, any of last year's tape, have no reference point with that. I just know that they're, you know, the thing that I think they do a great job of, they have an excellent scheme that challenges an offense. I think at the same time they do a great job of playing pursuit football. They play team unit defense, and they're getting a lot of people to the football, and they're enthusiastic about getting there. So you can see the character of the team has been, you know, developed, and I'm sure, you know, it's a process that I'm referring to that we're going through. At some point, someday, that'll be that way for us on offense. You know, we just have to. That's the process that we all talk about as coaches, and they've got a group of guys that have obviously understand what the coaches want. They've been there, experienced, and got some good leadership showing them.